before, where you would say, hey, go to market is my marketing and sales team, today it's very clearly there is a revenue team. And that revenue team is built of product, sales, marketing, customer success, enablement, and RevOps, right? All of those functions, customer success being sort of the new kid on the block and revenue ops being the new kid on the block. Let's remember where their history is and what they're designed to do within the organization, specifically as a company chooses its go-to-market motion for it to grow. Only 16% of companies are actually, their marketing and sales are targeting the same customers. And so what does that mean? That means that there's great inefficiency in how we're going to market. And really, when you level all that up, if you don't have an ICP that is GTM team approved, you really don't have one. But when you're in an enterprise, you want to be much more specific. And then with specificity, building out who those customer cohorts are in the segmentation model so that you can offer like services, like companies, right? Because the goal is scalability and repeatability. Startups tend to be reactive, and that's good, right? And the reason I say that that's good is because with few resources, smart people behind it, you're really trying to figure out how you can make the most hay out of what you've got, right? But again, today, it's a lot different than it was in 2015, where there were, say, 200 SaaS startups. Today, there's over 30,000, right? And so, it's not just enough to choose a framer template, put some text on it, and launch your website. GTM Partners shows that 86% of B2Bs currently rely on outbound. 50% of them say it's not working. And it's exactly based on what you just said. Everyone feels spammed. The ICP is critical throughout all different departments. It tightens up and becomes more repeatable. But at the beginning of a company, if you ask 10 people, they probably all have slightly different answers. By the time you're a scale up, you better have the whole answer. And that's really where enablement comes in. In startups, a lot of times sales leaders don't realize that marketing needs it, just like marketing doesn't realize that sales needs it. Not everyone needs access to everything, but everyone needs a constant information flow that has a cadence that allows people to understand what the context is of the department, how they're performing, and what needs to be changed in order to reach the next level goals, right? No one ever said, I love your change management program. Okay. I mean, not one person I know anyway. People are busier than ever. There's AI, there's the need to, there's been layoffs, inflation, all of these great things. What does it mean? There's a lot of people that are resistant to change, right? Breaking down change from a leadership perspective is incredibly important, and being very specific on what change looks like. People these days are choosing companies that they want to work with based on affinity. For example, are you sustainable? Do you give back to the community? Right? Or are you just cutthroat? And there's different types of brand values, right? Or company values that then come forward in the brand. Brand still tends to be the largest off-balance or off-balance sheet asset, right? And so it's incredibly important.
So let's get started. So Tim, what are you up to nowadays?
Hey, Saad, how are you? Thanks for having me. It's great to be here. So my name's Tim Hilison, and I'm the founder and CMO of Entry Point One, and we help scale startups, transform scale-ups, and I tend to work with a lot of enterprises as well. Entry Point One offers fractional CMO services and GTM advisory. And what does that mean? That means that not only do we provide strategy to these firms, but also strong operations, because we've been there and we're able to help them reach their growth objectives.
Okay, that's awesome. So you've been around for in this market for a while, and you've worked with Visa, Microsoft, PayPal. So just tell us how the GTM has evolved over a period of time. What was the case back then, and now how is it changing?
Yeah, GTM has evolved a lot. For instance, when I started, and my background is product marketing, a lot of times people would say that marketing led this, right?
Mhm.
And then today it's sales leads it. But we've seen that, with 10 years of CMOs and CROs, that GTM has certainly evolved, right? And not going too far back, Sod, but before departments were very siloed, processes were not in place for them to actually work together, and they had specific initiatives that they would do to try to go to market and to try to sell and market their products to build that customer preference, right? Sometimes that would work together, but sometimes that wouldn't. And what we saw, in the advent in the 2010s with marketing automation or with ABM, those are very symptomatic of the silos that existed, the technologies that existed, and how they bring people together. And now what we see are, fully integrated solutions, but also a lot more specificity and role, right? And what do I mean by that? Before, where you would say, hey, go to market is my marketing and sales team, today it's very clearly there is a revenue team. And that revenue team is built of product, sales, marketing, customer success, enablement, and RevOps, right? All of those functions, customer success being sort of the new kid on the block and revenue ops being the new kid on the block. Let's remember where their history is and what they're designed to do within the organization, specifically as a company chooses its go-to-market motion for it to grow.
Okay, that's perfect. So given the economy that is tanking, so how is that shaping the marketing world at this moment right now? We've seen a lot of startups which is cutting the marketing expense out of it, and a lot of focus is on sales. So how do you see is shaping up right now?
Right. So, it's really interesting because, coming out of this era where financing was readily available and we saw companies getting new funding in minutes, spending was just all over the place, right? And then what we saw is, oh, we're going to cut back the marketing department, or we're cutting back sales, or there's no longer a customer success department. And what we saw was a blame game where, there is a scapegoat and it is a department, and different companies had different departments that they blamed for different things, right? But modern go-to-market is about the alignment of the revenue team and what that strategy is to grow. Right? And in order to do that, there can't be silos. Let me give you a real tangible example.
Mhm.
And that is, for instance, the ICP, the ideal customer profile. Many times marketing would create an ICP, but it would be for marketing use, and they would use it in demand gen. And then all of a sudden you would get sales that's doing outreach, and they would reach to different customers because they defined a slightly different ICP. And there was a super interesting stat last year by B2B, by LinkedIn B2B Insight Group, right? And they were saying that, only 16% of companies are actually, their marketing and sales are targeting the same customers. And so what does that mean? That means that there's great inefficiency in how we're going to market. And really, when you level all that up, if you don't have an ICP that is GTM team approved, you really don't have one. And what we see is that, according to GTM partners, where Entry Point One is a certified partner, about 67% of companies with a well-defined ICP go to market faster and are more profitable than those that do not have one, right?
Mhm. Okay, this is awesome. So let's just get deeper into this. So obviously, right ICP makes a lot of difference, and then obviously comes the positioning part. So Can you please give us example where you sort of like came up with the right ICPs and the positioning and that did wonders?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, for instance, before you asked me a little bit about Visa and PayPal and Microsoft, a Microsoft example is, one of the key things was really understanding who their ICP was, right? They had different segments. For example, we built a big partner program in their mid-tier OEM segment, and there was quite an ecosystem. They had about 570 partners. However, they had spent a lot of money on key accounts and a lot of money on system builders, which was the smaller segment, but they didn't really know what the problems were or what the companies were facing, right? And so, one way of breaking this down for an enterprise organization is having that market research that really informs the different teams around who is doing what their pain points are, how the company can help them. And, I would say, and it's very much overused, but it's a smooth way of working, frictionless, right? So how does a mid-tier company work with Microsoft, right? Really defining that and ensuring that all of the different revenue team participants understand that is part and parcel to defining what that ICP is. And then oftentimes it is marketing because they are helping to lead the outbound and the inbound effort, right? It's about really going much deeper on that, right? So, it's not just demographics and psychographic characteristics, but what really are the technographic characteristics, right? What are the complementary characteristics that are really honing and building that from what is considered to be a total addressable market, or anyone who can use it. And startups and scale ups use that a lot. But when you're in an enterprise, you want to be much more specific. And then with specificity, building out who those customer cohorts are in the segmentation model so that you can offer like services, like companies, right? Because the goal is scalability and repeatability.
Okay, that's awesome. So you've talked about scalability. Let's just talk about some of the steps any startup can take in scaling from like going from a $5 million ARR to maybe 100 million plus. So what steps would you recommend that they should be taking?
Well, I would say that, probably the first steps that they should be looking at, Saad, is really defining who their market is. Right. Again, chances are with the founders, with the different hires, startups tend to be reactive, and that's good. Right. And the reason I say that that's good is because with few resources, smart people behind it, you're really trying to figure out how you can make the most hay out of what you've got. Right. But again, today, it's a lot different than it was in 2015, where there were, say, 200 SaaS startups. Today, there's over 30,000, right? And so, it's not just enough to choose a framer template, put some text on it, and launch your website, right? And so going back to steps, defining who your total relevant market is. Again, you start with a TAM, but then you build it down. Specifically, you're aligning across the team, and you're really diving down into who your buyer is going to be and what they expect. You're looking at competitive comparisons. How are they going to compare you, right? What is the offer out there, and what is your offer? Again, a great product is table stakes these days, right? And when you get this product, all of a sudden then it's like, how am I going to go to market? What channels am I going to invest in? We saw this a lot in your previous question when you were saying, hey, but what should companies do? Well, does every company need demand gen? Does every company need product-led growth? Should every company be doing search engine marketing and buying Google ads, we saw a lot of the waste that happened. And I would say that, look, when you define your market, when you define your ICP, when you align, you're able to then go out and say, hey, these are the go-to-market motions that we can align on that are going to have the biggest growth and profitability for our company. Now let's support those as opposed to doing random acts of marketing that may or may not help that GTM motion.
Okay, and so with the current environment, we are also seeing that there are a lot of SDR and BDRs burned out, a lot of pressure. Many of those guys are going to PIPs, and a lot of pressure is out there. And in this kind of scenario, and specifically from the marketing perspective, should there be a spend that supports the sales process, or no, zero spend, focus on the selling part?
Oh, I think that there's got to be spend. Coming from product marketing, having integrated inside sales with marketing previously, and there's always that interplay between, does it go to sales, does it go to marketing? Look, I'm going to start a little bit back for some context, and then we can go from there, right? But when marketing, and it usually does fall on marketing, but it needs to be, again, across the revenue team, is developing that positioning or that POV for the market, right? It needs to be brought in. But what is on your website does not translate to what sales is talking to when they're talking on one-to-one conversations. You've got one-to-many to one-to-one, right? The SDRs and inside sales of BDRs, all of those people that are really focused on building that market momentum, they really need to understand, how the client, who they're targeting, can benefit from the services that they're offering, and it needs to be in the client language, right? And there's different sales cycles for startups, scale-ups, or enterprises, right? Because you've got different competitive sets. Making that easy and making that referenceable, that's incredibly difficult, right? Because salespeople, and let's go back into their psyche, right? They are on the phone, they are working, they are trying to get these leads and build this pipeline, right? They are rejected all the time. They don't need someone who's just saying, here, do whatever. And a lot of times what we saw was demand gen would be very siloed from SDRs in the past. That's where enablement is the glue. Right? When you enable them to understand, here are the key messages, this is how they translate to these segments, this is what's important to them. And then the SDRs and the BDRs are able to translate those things. But, marketing needs to show them that they've got their back and that they're providing valuable information for them that then they can take in their own style, because again, their style is why people buy from people, right? That then the transaction can be consummate. And then you've got, all of the other things of, deal velocity and the different metrics that need to be tracked. And that's where, marketing, sales, and customer success in this instance really participate together to get one strategy. So then again, the sales and BDRs can have something that's repeatable and not bespoke constantly. And what you see in the maturity cycle from problem market fit, product market fit to platform market fit, right, is that, there's different degrees of that repeatability or that definition of what good looks like based on the life cycle of one's product.
Okay, that's awesome. So there's this one thing that we talked about, this is economy that is impacting all of it. Then there's another thing that is coming up, that is the AI, the Gen AI, and the applications that are coming up. And there's a lot of influx of tools that are available for the marketing and for sales guys. So how do you see the GTM motion shaping up with all of these new innovations that are coming up?
I would say that it's incredibly exciting. There's never been a better time to be a marketer, right? And for sales too. I'm very tech forward and very AI forward. And, I find in the companies that we work with, our clients, and then those that we advise, and then in thought leadership that I create through my partners or through my network, is that first of all, there's a lot of misunderstanding of what it is. When people work together on specific use cases to solve specific problems, or they can do it quicker than everyone having their own process, saying that they know how to do it, and not having a very clear objective. Let me give you an example. So, for example, I think that demand gen is a great example in this, right? What does the campaign design and analysis look like, right? If you've got the entire demand gen team thinking differently about that, well, what is sales going to think about that? Right. And so it's really about building that cohesive strategy. But there are so many ways to use AI right now, but it's really about being very deliberate and intentional about what that use case is and what it means for that company and their maturity. Let me give an example again. In your campaign design, right? Have you taken to account the ICP that you're targeting? I mean, it sounds like a no-brainer, but many campaigns. So making sure that from demand gen to your digital marketing and your paid ads, that you're using the same messaging is crucial. Then feeding that to sales, so if they're using different sequences, that they're using that messaging too, right? AI helps us do that. Right? And so we can create company-wide messaging, again, after we've been talking to our customers and on the market research and through the different digital tests that we would do, right, on our website, et cetera. But, really bringing that forward is a key area. Another area when you go deeper is personalization. So, we've all received tons of emails, and I've got to tell you, are still incredibly varied. So what is the overall strategy of a company for what their personalization is, and how does it match their brand, right? Well, AI, again, is pretty good at this. One has to have the experience and the knowledge and the understanding of what the strategy is to get AI to produce something like that. But, it significantly cut down our time, and we can then use that information to educate our teams so that we're operating consistently one go-to-market unit, not as different individuals within a company that are creating customer confusion.
Okay, so this is a scenario. I mean, this is the ideal scenario. Somebody has to use AI for the right purposes. But let's just consider a case where you can produce a lot of content through AI. I mean, that's very, very easy. You can produce all kind of combinations and bombard your economic buyers or whosoever your ICP is with that. And then there's a lot of pressure on the outbound side, and they are bombarding those ICPs with all those random messages and all of that. Okay, now the end user is actually getting super frustrated, and you can see the efficacy is going down of all the SDR moves and inbounds. The cost per acquisitions keep on going up and up. And so while, there are quite a few positives, but what actually is happening is a fairly, the end user is being spammed, like is being bugged from all channels, right? So what's your take on that?
I love this. And this is great. Okay. As outbound go-to-market motion is an old go-to-market motion. A stat by GTM Partners shows that 86% of B2Bs currently rely on outbound. 50% of them say it's not working, and it's exactly based on what you just said. Everyone feels spammed, and so how would it be before? You would have the sales rep. If it's sales rep led, for example, they would be focusing on anyone, mailing everyone. Right? It would be product focus, right? It would have, everyone would have a different cadence. I remember Unicorn, where I was integrating inside sales with marketing. Some salespeople had 23-step cadences. Other people had 14-step. They all said different things, right? So when you today and the amount of communications that we're getting, It's not volume based, right? Is the mark of what really is effective is I have sent 100,000 emails this month, or is it, hey, I've got 7 deals, right, that are in the pipeline, and that's where you problem focused content. That's contextual clues based on really understanding your ICP. And that's where you deliver value through what the product is, through understanding who your ICP is. So back to your point about, hey, we can all create all this great content. I don't know about you. Personally, I receive tons of stuff. I can tell when it's just generated and generic and is meaningless to me. And again, the volume play, if we send enough, we're going to get something, right? Companies are looking at, how do I actually solve a problem? How do I do it well? And how do I add value through that content? And again, that's deliberate and intentional. And that's about your brand values and your goal in creating customer preference. And I would say this around that too, which is even a higher level issue, Saad, is, the reasons the CEO needs to control the GTM motion is because, people react to incentives within your company or within a company. And if structures are mismatched, people will work in a misaligned fashion, right? And so, again, understanding how we want to use AI, what really is the goal, what are the GTM motions we want, and what is the customer experience that we want to give, that really defines how AI should be used effectively within a company.
Yeah, so let's just talk about this. You talked about the end user, and I think let's just talk about authenticity. And with SDRs, bots, and all of this content, will in-person interactions be back now? Like people will sort of like go back to, okay, let's just move away from this and let's just go to this in-person one-on-one discussion which used to work. Let's just go back to that era.
Well, here in the US, I think that we've definitely seen IRL in real life. I think that there's some changes as well, right? Before, remember how event heavy everything was, and then events sometimes were not effective. Then all of a sudden there was a pandemic where we were all doing these webinars, and these webinars became incredibly generic. And then we were wondering, how long can I be on Zoom or Google Meet? And now what we're getting to is a little bit of hybrid action, right? So we know that when we meet someone and have a valuable interaction with them, that we are much more willing to listen to them than to someone that we don't know. We also know that when we get an email, and I got one the other day that was trying to sell me something, and it was very apparent for me after the second line that they knew nothing about my business, nor did they read anything about my business, so that it was AI generated. Right? When you're talking to someone in person and you're understanding and connecting with that person around what it is they do, then we're able to think how our product can help them, right? Or our service, right? And, SDRs and BDRs are incredibly adept at really understanding and researching these companies. It's really not one or the other, it's the entire thing. Right? And so, just again, to quickly answer your question, yes, IRL is very important. Yes, it is going to separate the wheat from the chaff in what these interactions are. And yes, it depends upon your industry, category, and product on what types of stuff you do. Because something, a water bottle on Etsy is a lot different than buying an insurance policy, is different than investing in your son or daughter's college education and picking a financial institution that you want to be with. So, it all depends, but those in real life connections matter.
Okay. So this is great. So, so you've talked about the fact that mid-market companies are not aligned on the ICPs. How does this, if obviously you talked about how this affect, but why do you believe the mid-market companies are affected?
Mid-market companies or scale-ups?
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
so, let's really understand what a scale-up is, right? Because I think,
Yeah,
if you ask 10 people, you'd probably get 10 different answers, right? So,
sure.
product market fit, which is the middle tier of the 3P model GTM partner, defines it really well. And I love this definition because I think that product market fit, originally stated by Mark Andreessen in 2007, became this holy grail for a lot of companies, and everyone has a different definition on it. So, just going back to, scale-ups need to obviously scale and build repeatability in their processes and decision-making processes to make change within their organization. And as they mature, companies need to change often, right? But they also need to contain costs, and they're adopting new technology, they're adopting new ways of working, and they're defining more refined ways of measuring what their outcomes are to understand the overall health of the organization. And so when you go back to how a scale up can understand its ICP better, I would say three things. First of all, a company's positioning is not static, right? As the company defines its product better and understands its target market better, its total relevant market, and moves from a leads-based focus to more of an account-based focus, the positioning is going to tighten for those cohorts. Again, remember, we are selling to a defined audience. So that's one way, right? The second way is that, aligning these processes over the revenue team, many times when startups are becoming scale ups, again, they have more departmentally focused. It's okay to have a sales ICP and a marketing ICP and a customer success ICP, perhaps at the beginning, but at a scale up, it's not okay. Because again, you're going to be throwing darts at the board. So then, here you are aligning what that ICP is around that company, because you have defined a problem that has been validated within the market. And this too is, as budgets get bigger, as employees and departments get bigger, you are going to be creating investments in new technologies that enable growth, but also new processes for teams. And this usually translates into what marketing channels you're going to be doing, right? Yeah. And so, for example, you may have a product-led growth motion at the beginning of your company. And as many companies these days, Saad, operate, they need to have more of a partner-led growth motion because their solution does not work by itself very well. And so they may expand into that type of motion. Again, it's incredibly important to know who your ICP is and who your partner's ICP is so that you can create an ideal partner profile. Without that, all of a sudden you're running blind and everyone's running in opposite directions. And so, again, just to summarize, the ICP is critical throughout all different departments. It tightens up and becomes more repeatable. But at the beginning of a company, if you ask 10 people, they probably all have slightly different answers. By the time you're a scale up, you better have the whole answer. And that's really where enablement comes in.
Okay, so let's just talk about the scale ups. So in terms of people, processes, and tools, what would you like to see in any scale up? Okay, these should be there, these functions should be there, this kind of process should be there, and these kind of tool or tech stack should be there for any scale up to do better.
Yeah, well, okay, so that's a pretty broad question. I'm going to say, look, again, I believe that to be effective, you need to have a revenue team. So that is product, marketing, sales, customer success, enablement, and RevOps. Again, let's remember, from startups, most people don't have RevOps, right? Because it's a new kid on the block. They've got marketing operations and sales operations. However, we know that these departments are very biased. For example, as a marketer, I can tell you that, marketing ops would be like, hey, but look what we did. Well, RevOps is the Switzerland in the scale up, and they're being fed by marketing and sales and customer success, but they're really bubbling up what those metrics really truly are. Okay, so I think that, obviously analytics, a lot of people are using cloud data warehouses now to actually store that data, right, from the CRM. So the CRM, a lot of companies still, marketing doesn't have access to the CRM, believe it or not, right? And so you're taking this information, you're putting it in a cloud data warehouse, perhaps you're using a BI platform, a business intelligence platform, to create these dashboards and metrics that are not created by the departments, right? And you're actually able to have a discussion of what's going on, right? And what needs to be fixed. I think that, one of the true marks of today, and where we are helping a lot of our clients, is on a unified data strategy. So, all these channels, all these different tactics, how do you actually ladder that up and understand what's important? Again, going back to a cloud data warehouse, that's fundamental, but having a data strategy that is durable and can be counted on. So all of a sudden you're not reporting, imagine going to the board and everyone's reporting slightly different numbers. I mean, that gives a terrible impression of what the operations of the company are. Getting this data strategy down, I believe, is fundamental for companies. And then, I would say the last thing is, we have seen a ton of different tools that are built, point solutions that are built for specific departments. And so, we've all used Marketo. Marketo is a great example of this. Marketing uses Marketo. However, how do you actually use tools that are integrated across departments so that everyone who's using their time has the same single pane of glass view? That is the trend that we're seeing. And there's companies like Ignition that are, incorporating more of that market research and product launch cadence, so that you're getting this view across the organization, not view within one department, in order to be able to orchestrate a GTM motion together as a revenue team.
Okay, so this is very interesting. So just consider a case, and this is like the actual how the sales and marketing operates in the silo. CMO doesn't have access to Salesforce. The sales guy doesn't know what's happening in the market domain. So everybody is doing reporting ROI on their own matrices. So how do you break those silos? How do you come out of this situation? Because they don't like one another. So what would you go, and how would you sort of like get them out of this situation?
So, it's really interesting. I mean, this happens in so many companies, and we've worked with, startup scale-ups and enterprises on this. And it's just because people are people. And as, business becomes more complex, really, again, having a deliberate and intentional and written down strategy is really important, or everyone functions off of a different song sheet, right? I usually meet with the CRO directly and figure out what's important to him, what's the strategy, what does it look like, what's their cadence of reporting, who's doing what, etc. Right? And then as a fractional CMO or as the marketing leader, I will then figure out what marketing is and how to put that together, right? Not having access to different systems is very 2012. Let's put it that way, right? And so it's really interesting when you get that. And oftentimes you need to talk to the CFO, because it's really someone holding the purse strings in regards to licensing costs, as opposed to someone wanting to give access. But, in startups, a lot of times sales leaders don't realize that marketing needs it, just like marketing doesn't realize that sales needs it. Not everyone needs access to everything, but everyone needs a constant information flow that has a cadence that allows people to understand what the context is of the department, how they're performing, and what needs to be changed in order to reach the next level goals, right? That's how we team more effectively, and that's how we become, again, very intentional on building growth together. So, meeting with the leader, right? Meeting with the different team members to understand how they're using the tools, understanding how it is affected throughout the different departments. And then, what I like to do is I get together a subset of these people, sales and marketing, to actually work together and facilitate a brainstorm around what that would look like. Because it's one thing to go and architect a process for people in a bubble. It's another thing to create something that is easily digestible by people within the department, that they're going to adopt and that they're going to advocate for. And I build these advocates, and they help different people in their different departments, right? And a lot of times this is where this cross-functional, relationship-driven process begins. And then, when you roll that up, it's, several iterations down the line, defining what it looks like for both departments, who needs access to what information, and again, at what periodicity, so that people can make decisions that affect them. And what I would say is, one goal is that every single layer of the organization, you want people to have meaningful conversations. For a sales director to call a marketing director and say, your leads are not good and this and that and the other, that is really an unproductive conversation, right? However, if sales and marketing understand what the lead definitions are together, and something's not working and it's showing within the metrics, then sales and marketing can have a conversation about what are the next campaigns, how are we fixing them, what is sales doing to actually, talk to the customer about our messaging to get deal flow back to where it is, and how are we working together to solve that.
Okay, so all of this process obviously is about change management. Okay, so you're trying to bring in a change, and managing change becomes very, very difficult, and most of the projects fail, right?
Yeah.
So what's your take? So what's the best and ideal way of doing it, so as to, it doesn't get into this category of, 70% fail or 60% of these projects will just fail?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's so funny. I just wrote a LinkedIn post about this several weeks ago about, no one ever said, I love your change management program. Okay. Not one person I know anyway. People are busier than ever. There's AI, there's the need to, there's been layoffs, inflation, all of these great things. What does it mean? There's a lot of people that are resistant to change, right? Breaking down change from a leadership perspective is incredibly important, and being very specific on what change looks like, right? Defining what success looks like for the company oftentimes is missed. And, it doesn't just fall on the CEO, but it falls on the CMO, the CRO, the CSO, right? All of the different leadership that is involved. I think that poor communication is another driver of this. So again, we talked about what that change vision is and the benefits, but a lot of times this resistance to change is because people are afraid that it will they'll make them even busier, right? Or it will not work, and they're going to put a lot of work in something that someone else isn't all in on. Again, could go back to incentives, right? It could go back to metrics. But another reason that change fails is because at the operator level, leadership isn't involved. Oh, the lower levels will figure it out. This is one of the key reasons that without leadership backing or sponsorship, that, or commitment to change, that it's unlikely to occur. Right. And then finally, building that successful strategy. And let's talk about strategy, right? It does not need to be complicated, right? I find that micro change, meaning that building it into the workflow, but you have to figure out what the workflow is first, right?
Yeah.
Is probably one of the great ways. How many Slack messages do you have? Is all of a sudden putting a message on Slack in some channel that people are not connected to or can't find because of we all understand the great search capabilities of Slack. Is that effective? Probably not, but that's what's followed. And so, again, back to your point of in real life, getting people together, making it intentional, not making it overly long and onerous, and making it fun. These are things that people like and embrace. And, change can happen. But as leaders, we need to assess, is the pace of change what the CEO wanted? Or do we need to actually push back and change that given the size and scope of our organization so change sticks? And I would say that, cultural change always takes a lot longer. Building people under that one vision and getting them to believe in it, we know is difficult. And so, tread with caution.
Yeah, I guess so. This is one of the hardest thing most of the companies have to face. So, in terms of so there's a lot of hype around multi-channel marketing, the omni-channel marketing, and all of that. So, how to get it right? So, what are your thoughts on about that multi-channel?
Multi-channel and omnichannel, well, again, really, it depends on the category and the industry. I mean, if you are in retail, right, omnichannel is omnipresent, right? If you are in B2B analytics software, probably not, right? However, perhaps the most, one of the things I do when we go into companies is I assess brand strength. Right? Because again, on who you're targeting, it really depends. If you say that you are operating an omni-channel, but you're really not, or you are doing things inconsistently, this is where there's a big problem. And so, for B2B, which I tend to work more with, I look at brand strength, but I also look at cross-channel consistency. So for instance, again, demand gen cannot be operating in a silo. It needs to be operating with the revenue team and marketing, right? And then, across that product sales, customer success enablement, and RevOps. Are we saying the same thing when we're in store compared to our campaigns? And does that match with our ICP? I think that that's the key, right? And what we've seen time and time again is that many companies create customer confusion because someone has a great idea about a blog and that blog has nothing to do with what the campaign is or what the salesperson is saying. And so again, I'm not saying that we need to coordinate everything and everyone has to know what everyone is saying, but there are certain ways of saying, hey, look, this is a campaign calendar, this is what the messaging is, these are where you find the assets, this is how you build it, so that you enable a self-service model where people are educated and then they can go through and they can make sure that these omni-channel and multi-channel is actually helping the company grow and not just wasting cycles of employees that is not growing the bottom line.
Okay, that's awesome. So, I guess maybe we'll end this with this question. So you have branding and you have demand gen, okay? And obviously the company is evolving, is going from startup to scale up and all of that. How does the mix change? Does it stay cost consistent? Does it sort of like swings a lot? What's your take on it?
Oh, it certainly changes, but again, it depends on industry and category, right? And it depends on what functions are there. If I have a PLG motion, it's, which is my main go-to-market motion, it's much different than a sales-led motion, right? And so again, let's remember what brand is, right? Because it's been a bad word for so long in B2B, right? And B2C uses this quite effectively. And that is, brand is going to build awareness and reputation, right, of what it is that you sell and what your company stands for, right? And a lot of times people these days are choosing companies that they want to work with based on affinity. For example, are you sustainable? Do you give back to the community? right? Or are you just cutthroat? And I mean, there's different types of brand values, right? Or company values that then come forward in the brand. Brand still tends to be the largest off balance or off balance sheet asset, right? And so it's incredibly important. And one of the reasons that we see that a lot of companies have dropped it is because they didn't understand it. And I can tell you, coming from being trained in brand from Visa and Microsoft and PayPal and all these large companies, it's much different when you go to a small company. And again, just because everyone consumes marketing messages these days doesn't make everyone a marketer. And so brand changes over time because it becomes more of a pull than a push. When you are in the early stages, you don't have much capital or assets, and what you're trying to do is build your awareness with a specific group of people. And again, where we saw this go off the rails is some companies wanted to build it with all people. And again, that, if you can sound all of your customers, then that is going to be very expensive. Brand changes because it is going to be highly targeted, but it is going to provide understanding of how it is going to really help that company and those employees, because at the end of the day, people choose companies that have helped companies like them so that the people who are buying are successful. Does that make sense? And so, and then demand changes as well in the fact that you are scaling up. You may be doing much more retention in a scale up. You may be expanding to new verticals or expanding to new geographic markets. And so again, you've got this fragmentation of actually what it means, yet still the need to be consistent across your brand and demand. And they tend to be a motor of growth.
Okay, that's awesome. So, Tim, I truly enjoyed our conversation. So just before you leave, so on these topics that we have discussed, we have discussed an array of topics. Which 3 books would you recommend that any person should read, which would really help them with all of this?
So let's see. Oh, that's a great question. So I think that there's a book called Move, and it's by Sangram Vagra and Brian Brown, and they are the founders of Go-to-Market Partners. And it's a quick read, but it talks about what modern go-to-market is, and I think that that's a fantastic book. I have to look up the title, but I know who is doing it. But it's it's like called The Coming Age. And I want to give it's The Coming Wave, and it's Technology Power and the 21st Century's Greatest Dilemma, and it's by Mustafa Suleyman, who was at DeepMind and then at OpenAI. Again, I'm pretty AI forward. I think that I'm halfway through this right now. I think it's fascinating, right? And then I like to read things that are outside of my work as well. And someone who I believe is absolutely amazing is Salman Khan. Okay, and Salman Khan has a new book, and it is about like the brave new words. And it is about how AI will change education as we know it. And it specifically focuses in on the underserved and how everyone can access education with AI. And I find it to be fascinating. So those are 3 books that I've been reading or have read that I would recommend to anyone.
Okay, so Tim, again, I truly appreciate your time and these valuable insights. I mean, I'm gonna listen to it all over again. Tim, how can people find you?
Thanks, Saad. The best way to contact me is through LinkedIn, Tim Hilison, and then you can go to my website, entrypoint1 with the number 1.com. And one of the things that we're doing is we're offering a free GTM assessment. to
Okay.
companies that are looking to up level. And so, you can find that on my website and on my LinkedIn, and I look forward to meeting anyone.
Okay, so that will be great. Anything else you want to add, Tim?
No, I think that's it. Thank you.
So Tim, that was great, a great talk. So I truly enjoyed it, loved it.
Yeah, thank you. Have a great rest of your night. I know it's nighttime there, so
Yeah.
I
Have a nice day. Have a nice day.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye. Take care.